This second video explores how to run Dbvisit Standby when the primary database is on-premise and the standby database is to be hosted in the Azure cloud. We will look at the network considerations, specifically adding firewall rules, modifying network security groups, and touch on the IPv4 restrictions, then move on to installing the Dbvisit software and setting up a new configuration. We have made the following assumptions: that the primary and standby hosts have already been provisioned, Oracle software has already been pre-installed on both primary and standby machines, and on the primary server there is already a running database that is in both archive log mode and force logging mode. My virtual machine is DBV 2016 DR. It's a Windows 2016 data center machine of size standard DS11 with 2 virtual CPUs and 14 GB of memory. In order for the standby and the primary host to connect to one another, we first of all need to make a change within the network security group of this DR server and allow inbound and outbound security rules on the Dbvisit ports. Dbvisit has 3 required ports: the DBVnet 7890, the DBV agent on 7891, and the central console or the DBV server on 4433. As this machine, the cloud machine, is going to be the standby host, I'll also open port 4433 for the standby central console. In order to do this, I've created 2 sets of rules, and I've created them across a range rather than 1 rule per port. My inbound security rule I've called Dbvisit in. As you can see, I've created it any protocol allowing a source port range of star, and I have the same configuration for Dbvisit out. As this is demonstration purposes, it's quite an open configuration. However, it's purely for demo purposes. So I created the inbound security rules and the outbound security rules on my DR server. If I go ahead and connect to my DR server using the Microsoft remote desktop file that's downloaded when you click connect, and it's also worth mentioning that I mapped my local folder that I downloaded the software to. I allowed the mapping to the virtual machine, and I changed the connection name to be more meaningful rather than the IP address. So if I go ahead and connect to that server, in addition to adding the ports on the network's security rules, we also need to open the ports in the firewall of the actual machine. And to do this, I've added Dbvisit in ports and Dbvisit outbound ports, again with a range. Outbound I've called Dbvisit out and specified the range. In addition to this, we need to look at the network. Windows 2016 Data Center by default has both TCP/IP4 and TCP/IP6 enabled. In order for Dbvisit Standby to communicate successfully, we need to uncheck the TCP/IP version 6 and leave only TCP/IP version 4. Further to that, we ensure that DNS is being used, and we uncheck the box that's automatic metric and place a value in here greater than 0. Now that we have the networking configured, we also need to look at the users. We have a look at the local security policy and the user rights assignment, The log on as service privilege needs to be granted to both Dbvisit and the user oracle. In addition to this, each user must be a member of the local administrators group, and Dbvisit, who will install the software, needs to be a member of the Aura DBA and also the Oracle 12c Home DBA group. While we're here, we can go ahead and install the software. I've already copied to this server the latest release of Dbvisit Standby. The Oracle binaries have been copied and already pre-installed. As this is to be the standby server, and we'll have DBV server installed. Currently the web browser is only supported with Chrome or Firefox, not Internet Explorer, which comes with your virtual machine's Windows build. So I've gone ahead and installed Firefox. I've also taken the liberty to install Notepad++, as I enjoy using that as an editing tool. Start up the standby wizard and accept the agreement. This is to be the standby server, so we're also going to install the central console. We're going to accept the default for the location. It's going to be installed under the user Dbvisit. So we go ahead and pop in the password. Each of the components are installed. There's details of the install log there, and if we have a look up here, you can see that the 3 services are installed and are now running as they've been started automatically. Now that's the remote host. The local host, or the primary server, is an Oracle VM VirtualBox running Windows Server 2012. It's got 4 GB of RAM, but it also has 2 processors. Its name is DBV 202. And if we connect to this machine, you can see that I've also added the inbound and outbound security rules here. We've disabled IPC version 6. DNS is in use. We've unchecked the metric. In this case, both the Oracle software and the Dbvisit software will be installed by user Oracle. So as you can see, the user Oracle has that privilege. And Oracle is part of the Aura DBA group and the administrators group. So in this local primary host, I've already installed the Dbvisit software. We have a database already running on this machine. Let's have a look in Notepad++. I've needed to add to the local hosts file the IP address of my Azure machine. And if I jump back to the DR server, here I've added the IP address of the router here at home. And this means that when the connection comes through to the local host, it comes into our router. I've enabled the ports, Dbvisit ports. My local machine is running on an IP address that the router accepts. So in other words, I haven't configured the IP address of the actual virtual host. The IP that the Azure virtual machine sees is that of the externally facing IP, which is my router's IP. Start our Dbvisit configuration. We must first check that each of the hosts, the primary and the standby, are resolvable across the Dbvisit ports. The easiest way to do this is to install the Telnet client, which isn't actually enabled by default. So you need to turn on the Windows features, select a feature, and I've already done it here, but this just for demonstration. Select the Telnet client and install it. Once you've installed the Telnet client, you can check that my primary Dbvwin 202 is resolvable across the agent port and the Dbvnet port, which it is. Similarly, from the other side, if I now go on to my primary server, which is my local host, and try telnetting to my standby Dbvwin 2016 DR across the agent port, it's fine. And let's also try on the Dbvnet port, which is fine. So I've gone and logged into the Dbvisit Standby Central console, which is running off the DR host. And we can go ahead and add our host into the configuration. So let's first add in the primary host, which is Dbvwin 202. Put the passphrase in that we used at creation time, and the software knows that it's a Windows machine. We have a nice green tick beside the host, which is good. And let's add in now the standby. And the same again. It knows it's Windows, and we can go ahead and create that host. So both hosts are online and available. So we can go from here to creating a new configuration. Okay, our source host is going to be Dbvin 202. Let's accept the license. And our source database is going to be our archive log database LA, which is running in forced login mode. We can go ahead and double check that that path is available. The port's correct. Now let's add in the standby details. Happy for the database to be called the same. Let's just double check that these directories are also viable. Okay, we're going to go for a Dbvisit Arch directory to be on C, not D, like the primary. I know that the installation is the same for the Dbvisit software, and let's just quickly double check the Oracle Home. Okay, that's also C. So we'll go ahead and change that to C. I'm happy for the database name to be the same, but I'm going to change the configuration to be Azure 2, and I'm not going to create a license at this time. Okay, now that we have our configuration in place and it's fully licensed, we're able to go ahead and create our standby. To do that, we select the Create Standby icon, and then we choose the configuration that we'd like to implement. So in this case, our source is Dbwin 202, which is our on-premise primary, and our target is our Azure cloud server, Dbwin 2016 DR. Dbvisit Standby will run some checks on the standby server to make sure that there's not already a database running, or there's maybe files in an archive location. Once all these pre-checks have been performed, the option to create a new standby becomes available. We're not going to use Oracle Restart in this instance, and we're going to accept the defaults. So the Windows user is Oracle. And we're going to accept the source temp location as the defaults, which is C Windows Temp. Now in this case, we're not going to use transportable media, it's purely because the database is quite small. But this is quite an interesting option in light of the fact that you're moving from an on-premise to a standby in the cloud. So it might be worthwhile to do the first half by creating the backup to your template location, having Dbvisit stop, copy the files over to the cloud server, and then have Dbvisit pick up again. Because the database is quite small, we're actually just going to run it straight. Once we're happy with all our details, click Create for the standby database. Okay, now that we've given some time for the database creation to take place, you can see it was actually not a problem to run the standby directly from the on-premise primary over to the standby. We didn't need the transportable media option. As you can see, the task is completed successfully. See that from the taskbar. And now that we have a standby in place, we can use the Database Actions tab to send and apply logs. So for example, running the log gap report, we can send a log over. I'm going to apply them at the standby side. As you can see here, the task is completed successfully. So then when we run another log gap report, the gap is down to 0. We can also check the status of the databases. We could start the daemons for the automatic send and apply of logs. We can synchronize the database. We can perform a graceful switchover, providing the log gap report is 0. We can switch so that the standby becomes the primary and vice versa. Or if disaster was to strike, we can activate the standby database in the cloud and have that be your new primary. So it clearly makes a DR solution with your standby database in the cloud.